B4B TV. Real people, real stories, real Bradford.
Hello and welcome to our Bradford for Better show. The show that brings real people, real stories and real Bradford to inform and inspire and empower our community. I'm very honoured that I've got a very special guest today with me, Sofia Buncy. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
How are you, Sofia?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well.
Alhamdulillah. It's an honor that you make time for us. Thank you very much for giving time to us today. I wanted to ask you, Sofia, many questions. I've got a lot of questions in my mind to ask you. The reason being, you are playing such a significant role in community, and I'm mindful of that you have got different roles in community. So I would say I will ask you one by one so our audience can see and understand what actually you do, because I was confused myself. What do you do? Are you a community development worker? Are you somebody who's working in prisons with Muslim Asian women? Are you a researcher? Or are you, I've heard recently, I think a year ago, you're part of West Yorkshire Lieutenancy. So you tell us now.
I think at times I also get confused as well. I get confused as well, so I'm going to have to say all of the above.
Okay.
But my journey into community work started as in the youth and community field.
Right.
And I just think it's not one of those fields that you can just easily shrug off or discard. So
Yeah.
at the moment, as you've rightly said, my specialism is that I'm a researcher within the criminal justice system. I look at the experiences specifically of Muslim women, but across the board, black, brown and ethnically minoritized women who are disproportionately sentenced, who maybe don't have enough understanding of the criminal justice system or their rights, and seek some solutions to raise an awareness of those challenges that they face. So
Okay.
that is my day job. However, on the periphery, as you've said rightfully so, there's issues when you're sat in a grassroots organisation like the Khidmat Centres that you can't ignore.
Yeah.
So also I'm quite active in youth work and youth leadership, multi-faith work and charitable work around that as well. So I do
Okay.
that because I think the peripheral stuff really fills my cup and I
Okay.
enjoy it. So all of the above, yeah.
So if you go back, where did you actually started? What was your first role in community? Like after finishing your education, what did you do first?
So my education primarily was when I went on to do my degree, it was behavioural science and research. So
Okay.
I always had a research hat on. You know, I was always sort of academically that way inclined.
Okay.
But while I was doing my degree, I started working with young people within the community. So you have little voluntary work experiences you can carry out, and that was to do with working with young people in socially economically deprived areas, raising aspirations, and helping young people to understand their journey into adulthood.
Yeah.
I also started working and volunteering at the Voluntary Action Kirklees in Huddersfield.
Okay.
So I think that's when really I got to understand like the strategic and policy development side of community work. So
Okay.
although there was frontline work, there was a whole strategic work and how do we develop communities, how do we understand communities, especially black and brown communities, and
Yeah.
what are some of the disadvantages and inequalities facing them. So once I graduated, I then went into youth work. There was a position that came up for a female youth worker.
So youth work was your first, in a way, first role, first paid job.
It was,
Was
yeah.
it from there? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see any difference in our youth now and then?
So I think some of the challenges that they have been similar, especially the communities that I've worked with. So I've always worked with quite deprived communities, and communities that may not have the same opportunities and chances as, say, other communities. So, you know, even at the time, the challenges very much remain the same. You know, how do communities elevate themselves to the next level when perhaps socially, economically, they're not as, you know, they're not as grounded as, say, other communities? Who are the role models within those communities? How do we open doors for young people, and how do aspirations change? So obviously, compared to when I first started out, there's a lot more stimuli for young people in their environment now, you know. So they have social media influencers, you know, the Snapchat, the Instagram.
It's growing fast. And I watched the video which you were part of in COVID. Would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, so that video I think you're referring to was young in
with
COVID.
the young people,
Young in COVID, the silent pandemic. So once again, my youth work really hit home during the pandemic, because I was sat here at the Khidmat Centres during COVID, and as I was leaving work, came across a number of young people that felt quite marginalised in the conversation around COVID, and they felt like perhaps in many ways they were being blamed, especially by some of the government messaging, that they were not adhering to some of the guidelines, and perhaps that young people were congregating and mixing, and some of them were saying, look, you know, either we're being scapegoated, or on another aspect, they just felt like this was one of the most important times in their life. You know, some of them were doing their GCSEs. They were very much learning about themselves. They were learning about how do they step into adulthood, whether that's working life or college, but felt like that wasn't being taken into consideration in terms of the adverse impact that COVID was having on them. I think there was a real narrative that these young people are resilient, they really won't be impacted much, and we can just leave them to one side, and they'll weather it, they'll get through it, and that wasn't the case. So I think as somebody that works with inequalities, and somebody that is there to raise the visibility and the voice of communities that perhaps necessarily are not heard, the young community was also personally for me one of those communities. And that short film that we had, and that very tiny budget, you know, we really put our heart and soul, and we took a lot of risks to make that film, especially at a time where many people were, you know, many practitioners went home. Everybody went where it was safe, and rightly so. They went home, but we thought Bradford deserves this type of justice, because you know, we are the youngest city in Europe. So for us not to document young people's voices and experiences in such a historic moment, and I'm sure this historic moment will be taught within schools and colleges for years to come. So that film did extremely well.
It's a brilliant piece of work. I've seen that, and I think in COVID, everybody I would say, their mental health got affected. So youth who is going through or was going through at that time, I think, yes, we do sometimes not give as importance or focus on their mental health and what they were going through. So our youth is our future, and we cannot neglect that. We cannot say that, okay, that's all right, but that is not okay, because you've seen them very closely. And have you got any message for our youth, because you're working so closely with them? Is there anything you would like to say to our audience who are watching us now?
I think there's a number of messages, and one of my strongest messages this week has been to young people to really seek out who those role models and mentors are. Quite often the message that I've given to young people is, go and speak to practitioners, go and speak to people within your community who you think, you know, I want to aspire to do what they do. Ask for those opportunities. You'd be very surprised at how many people are willing to say, come and shadow me, or how many of us that were not given opportunities to be able to open doors and really have had to knock those doors down ourselves. We'll say to young people, actually, I don't want you to go through the same hardship that I did. I'm happy to mentor you in a way that is meaningful and authentic. I'm happy to connect you up with some, you know, I might not necessarily be in media, but I'm happy to connect you up with somebody that is, to present opportunities. I think the aspiration of our young people are rising as well, and that's wonderful to see. It's absolutely brilliant that, especially when we see young women going into further education, working life. So seek out who your role models are, do approach people, and don't let anybody else set a glass ceiling for you. Don't let anybody else tell you just because you live in a certain city or you live in a certain area that you can only travel that far. And I think particularly myself, I'm renowned for going into non-traditional careers. So whether that is youth work that, you know, my family had very little understanding of, or prison work and research in there that really some might deem quite a prohibited career. I, if anything, are testament to pushing the bar and pushing and breaking through that glass ceiling and saying, no, actually we can. So don't take no for an answer.
Thank you very much. I think that's a brilliant message, a very positive message for our youngsters. Moving on from your community development worker, moving on to the prison work, would you like to share your journey? How did you get into the prisons? Was it the research took you there, or you just went there and research came later? What was that?
Again, interestingly, my journey into prison work, so it wasn't an aspiration for me to go and work in a prison. Interestingly, my journey once again stemmed from community. And this is something that, you know, we were speaking about earlier. When you're at a grassroots level, there's a lot more that you see. And there's a lot more that you see playing out that you wouldn't say where you sat in an institution somewhere. So my prison work stemmed from community work, where actually I was working within a community centre in Huddersfield at the time, and saw this small spike in Muslim women going to prison. And I thought, maybe felt slightly guilty myself. It's not something I've thought of, it's not something I've heard of, Muslim women incarceration, and I wondered why. I wondered why, because there was a very open narrative around Muslim men going to prison, and perhaps there was a level of privilege and acceptance with that, and it was just a coming of age thing for them, was a narrative around that. Whereas with women, I was just totally oblivious to why Muslim women go, and then that really curiosity, you know, they say sometimes curiosity killed the cat. So the curiosity got the better of me, and I thought, well, I wonder what's happening with them, and I would like to find out more.
So was that your research part?
Yeah, that my
researcher in you wanted to know what actually happens to these women when they are in prison.
Absolutely, and what led them there. I just wanted to know what is it that's led them there, and what are their journeys. So that's when I went into some of our neighbouring prisons, HMP Newhall and Askham Grange, and really sold my case and said this is what I'd like to do, because at the time, you know, I was quite disappointed to find that there was no existing research about Muslim women prisoners, not in academia, not in the women's sector, not in community, and that in itself said a lot.
So when was your first research? Like, can you remember the year?
So 2013 was when I began my research, and 2015 was when we launched the first report. So it's 15 months of research.
So I think I met you at work at that time, first time, because there was the report you brought to us. And we were going through we had a meeting, and I think that was your first report, and after that you've done so much work. That was the opening, that was the beginning of your prison work. So what were your own personal stereotypical views when you actually entered the prison and worked with them and did the research? Do you think you had something?
I think first of all, it was a journey for me as well, because I have not at that point I had not trained as a prison practitioner, and so there was a little bit of perhaps apprehension and anxiety from my end of how would I, because
it's very natural to feel like that,
especially when there's such strict protocols, you know, where you're working within a secure environment and everything you do is really under the microscope and watched, and there is no room for mistakes. And then you go in and you're developing a project around race equality and faith equality and gender equality, and really pushing a narrative that is very new. You know, equality within the CJS is something that we really need to work on across the board. It's something that is only just being taken seriously. It hasn't been the top of the priority list. So, you know, there was apprehension for myself, and even when I'd gone in, I tried to go in with as much of an open mind as I could in terms of working with the women. You know, we're not there to ask them what offence is it that you've committed. We're not there to judge women. I think one of the things that really stood out for me was just the stark contrast of the types of Muslim women that were in there, from very young women to actually very older women in their 60s and 70s. And I don't think I really expected that.
Yeah.
I don't
It's an
think,
eye-opener for you.
yeah, especially when there's very older ladies in there, and you think, well, what are you doing in here, and how has your journey led you here? And then I think in other parts, you know, you're having to avail trust with women that have had very traumatic journeys, and they're not automatically going to tell you about how and why they ended up in the criminal justice system. So at that point, although I'd gone in as a researcher, what I found myself doing was actually doing hands-on casework.
Yeah, so building the relationship, building the trust with them in order for them to go through your research.
But also in a genuine way, helping and supporting them and saying, look, I would like you to move on, I would like you to rehabilitate and enter society in a fulfilling way, whether that is, you know, with families, without families, relocating, whatever you require. So really I was trying to feel out the issue and what was happening with the women, but that couldn't be done in a clinical way. It had to be meaningful. And so soon you find that your job descriptions changes very organically, changes into, well, it's not just research, it's also practical support, and it's also you know, liaising with offender managers in prisons and governors and lobbying and speaking about equality. So yeah, my job description vastly changed when I got in there, and you have to do whatever it takes.
So Sophia, we're talking about the prison work, and I'm saying to you that I've got many questions to ask you. Going back home, what was your family's reaction? What was your mom's reaction like? Did she accept it? Was she worried about you choosing this role? What was her reaction? I would love to know that.
As a mum, you're asking me that question, aren't you? I think at first she obviously she had the natural anxiety around, you know, safety and you know, what types of people are in there, and you know, it's quite a profession that might be deemed to be a little bit dangerous. So she wanted to know, you know, would there be some assurances for my safety? Why that profession? You know, I've post-graduated as well as I'm a degree holder. And so she was a bit like, well, you're very educated, Sophia, is there something else you could be doing? And I think so. A lot of the time when you're trying to enter professions that maybe nobody else has been in before, especially with the prison work and being a Muslim female myself, it meant really mitigating and a little bit of you know, give and take and understanding. And I think over time, as I was explaining, you know, not giving details, but explaining about the inequalities facing these women, about some of their journeys. And we know this, we know like many women in prison have faced, you know, domestic violence, but up to 60% of women, you know, sort of disclose historic domestic violence, coercion, family crime, those sorts of difficult and tough life journeys that they had. You start to put into context why they're there. And I think much of my job, it's not, you know, you say research and people think, oh, boring academic stuff. Actually, a lot of my role is telling stories. So I tell stories in a way that is palatable to certain audiences. So those stories I tell to my own community, that this is why these women are there, and you know, anonymise those stories and say this is what journeys look
real
like.
Stories then,
but also try to affect academia and try to impact policy and make a change and difference at a level where we know Muslim women's voices can be quite invisible. We know some women within our community have, you know, quite a lot of agency, and others have no agency, and they're you know, they're not actively out in the public domain, perhaps not accessing services the way that we do, perhaps have very hidden journeys and difficult lives. So it was about doing justice, but doing justice to two very different audiences, your own community and the mainstream community, but within that keeping a balance and not sensationalizing. And I think that's been one of the toughest parts of the journey. How are you honest but balanced?
Yeah, that's very, very difficult. You've just mentioned about these women coming out of you know, out of prison and accessing the services. So what is the next stage? What is in place? You know, the resettlement work, in what is in place, if you want to just share that.
So in terms of what's in place, I, as researchers, myself and my co-writer Ishtiaq Ahmed, we'd written, I think on two previous occasions, about you know, some of the drivers to these women going to prison, some of their journeys in custody, and we looked at equality issues around the access to services or lack of access to services, more to the point.
Yeah.
And then we just felt like we would have to outwardly demonstrate what a re-entry model looked like when it came to Muslim women coming back to communities, and that's where we had the conversation with Khidmat Centres. You know, Muslim women were telling us things like, you know, it's quite difficult for us sometimes to go back to the places where we came from, the communities or the families, because
even the families, the
Never social stigma,
you
know, the taboo, the you know, the shame and dishonour, reputational damage. They were not you know, they readily able to go back home, and it's not that I'm saying that all women would never go home. Actually, a certain number of them said, I'd rather start again, or I need help in strengthening family relationships again, or I would like help in resettling in a new community, not my own community. So we just thought Khidmat Centre would be the best place to trial that after many conversations with lots of organisations. So that was about creating a safe space where you have experienced practitioners. So they call people like myself and my team through the gate practitioners. So the gate is a prison gate. So we work behind the prison gate, familiarise ourselves with the women, create bonds and relationships, and when they come out into the community, we're also in the community. We really had to pioneer that model, and what that model of support looks like here at the Khidmat Centres is offering women access straight away to the things that they imminently need on release. Sometimes that is you know, hygiene packs or food parcels that they come out the prison gate. Sometimes it's access to benefits and housing and being in a safe space. So we support them in that, and then we work with women over a long-term period of time to really help them find their confidence again, help them to step out into society. And for some of them that can look like even learning to access a service, or learning to go into further education, because it's something they've never done before.
So is Khidmat Centre hosting them?
Like, so
you are running services here for them?
We absolutely do, and I think the fact that we are a mainstream organisation and have multiple services in place already, so we have many educational classes that run on site. We also have a lot of sports and a lot of physical activities that run inside, and for mental health and well-being, that's really crucial.
I was about to come there, that all these women who've been through, for whatever reason, how much you have witnessed, how does that affect their mental health, I would say?
I think,
would you say most of them?
I think as a community we're not too great about speaking around mental health. And many issues we internalise. So when you're constantly internalising and you're not speaking about traumas that you've faced or difficult journeys that you've faced, that will manifest itself in some way or another. And unfortunately one of the byproducts of that is mental health, anxiety, depression, you know, so those, and then especially when you've been somewhere that's as traumatic as a prison, sometimes the experiences that you've had there, and I know I still speak to women now when they come in, and I think our familiarity with them behind the prison gate in here, because some of them say things like, well, I can't say the P word at home, prison word, I can't say the P word at home. So it's like having to shut in the back of your mind the fact that you ever went to a prison, and to discard that chapter of your life when really there's traumatic baggage that you're bringing in from there. So absolutely, it's we've written about this in our report, the need for you know, culturally sensitive and faith-based counselling when women are released from prison, and to unravel very complex histories and journeys, and that won't happen overnight.
No. Do you think our communities needs to be educated
around the journey of Muslim women prisoners,
about accepting them, about giving them the respect that, you know, like you just mentioned, if they are not allowed to say the P word, it's like you need to erase that part of your life which when you were in the prison. But if you think about it, that part might be the most significant part which has impacted them and changed them.
Of course.
Because you can never be the same person before you go to prison and when you come back. And then the community, and I personally think starts from the home, families. If the families will disown you, if the families will not respect you, if the families will not see you as the same person as you were before going, the stigma attached to that, it can completely destroy their mental health.
Yeah, and I think I won't 100% say that prison's a bad thing for everyone. I at the beginning of the journey, especially my own research, I think, my gosh, if you ended up in prison, then that could be very sort of dangerous and very damaging. However, interestingly, some women that have been to prison, some of our women as well, some of them quite extraordinarily say it's the best thing that happened to them, because some of them are fleeing, as you already are aware through your own work, domestic violence. They're fleeing very dangerous situations. So when they go into a prison, some of them say that was the safest. It's the safest I ever felt. So it's looking at those individual journeys and thinking, where is it? And what role did prison play in their life? And sometimes it can be quite a damaging role. Other times it can be quite it can be a role that really helps them to find themselves. It can be a role which allows them to explore freedom in a way that they've never experienced before, and it can really be the making of them. So it's very interesting. But in terms of your question around educating communities and communities understanding, I think that's why activists like myself and my team exist. Because time and time again we go out, we campaign, we write, we work across the entire board to humanise the stories of Muslim women prisoners.
Because these are real stories. They have suffered. And what you just said about prisons can be maybe the safe place for them. Maybe a place where they can actually reflect about their life. And they never had the chance before. And a lot of biographies about different people have been such a positive time in prisons, because in your normal daily life maybe you will never get that chance to sit and think and actually make that change in your life. You can come out as a completely different person. And we know many people that have changed the trajectory of their life after incarceration. We know historical figures that have done that. So it's each person has their own individual journey. And so we try our best, as I've said, to show those human stories, to give voice, to give visibility, to challenge a system that's not necessarily made for our women, but then on the same note to also allow women to now slowly start telling their own stories, because there's an acceptance around the Muslim Women in Prison project where people are like, oh yeah, that's that team at the Khidmat Centre that works with them. We've made it okay to talk about that issue. But that takes a lot of work. It takes an incredible amount of work. Definitely. It's many years of work where people can accept that, okay, this is some sort of norm. It's happening. Accept that it's actually happening in our community, and accept that actually we've spoken about a very difficult subject area, maybe a subject area that is in no way sympathetic at all. However, we've also sought solutions, and those solutions are re-entry support hubs like ours. Those solutions are academic research. Those solutions are affecting change at a policy level. And what about the personal satisfaction? Do you get lots of du'as from these ladies?
Absolutely. I think that's why we do it. It is just the sincerity and the acknowledgement of the support that you're given, and the fact that you see life-changing support.
And there is hope there.
You look back in satisfaction. Sometimes that can be several months down the line, several years down the line, and you just think, wow, like there's a young girl that we've worked with for many years, 5-6 years, who's now off to university to do software engineering. And there's a lot of support that we've given this young lady, and on the same note she's given a lot back to the organisation, and you just think, wow, like this person has moved
stories,
from here to here, and it will be the making of her. It will absolutely be the making of. And what I really love the most is when women come back with lived experience and they say, we want to help other women now. How do we get involved? How do we help those women? Because I was in that position, several months ago, several years ago. I want to give back.
MashaAllah. That's brilliant. I've got so many questions, and I've got a few more rules to ask you now. Okay, moving on from there to mashallah, you are part of the West Yorkshire Lieutenancy.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us a bit more about that? How did that happen?
I wonder how that happened as well. I wonder how that happened. So I think it was, I can just speculate that I think it was several reasons. So it seems like a long time ago, but in January 2020, I believe it is, the Khidmat Centres was chosen to host Their Royal Highnesses Prince William and Kate.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that as well.
Yeah, well, I'm tying it together
Right,
when I think it happened. I think it happened. So
Yeah.
myself and my colleague and general manager at the time, Ishtiaq Ahmed, were charged with, you know, sort of that news, quite surprising news, but charged with that news and keeping discretion.
Yeah.
While we were to know that they would come and visit our wonderful city, and the fact that, and in terms of the community visit, so the community visit was a Khidmat Centre side, and we know they also attended City Hall for the civic visit and Mile Horse as a business visit,
Yeah.
that we would really have to showcase the best of Bradford community.
Yeah.
We had an absolutely wonderful time doing that, and involved our local schools. We had lots of school children outside the centre here waving their flags.
I saw the videos and
They
photos, and you must be really, really proud. One, of course, is for all of us,
Yes,
for Bradford.
absolutely.
And then within Bradford, Khidmat Centre,
Yes.
and all the places where they went, Lahore and the city centre. So how was that experience? I mean, I can see the photos there
Yes,
on the wall.
we do.
So
we have
what,
some.
how was that?
I think it was in parts it was a little bit surreal. In parts, you know, there was obviously slight pressure, because there's so much, and our communities are so rich in terms of diversity and what they have to offer.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as you know, we had other providers stationed here as well. You know, people that worked with the younger children, people that worked in communities and faith work. So we really wanted to do justice to Bradford, because I think sometimes
Because you were
Bradford,
representing. The centre was representing the whole of Bradford.
Of Bradford, yeah. So it wasn't just about this little pocket of BD7. It was
It's about everyone,
what do the communities of Bradford look like? What does their provision look like? What do they bring to the city? And how do we, you know, seize every single opportunity we can in order to showcase that? And I think that was just, it was wonderful. It was very rewarding. And themselves, you know, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge were so humble and so easy to speak with and get along, and they genuinely paid an interest in every single group that they visited, and they took their time and really to digest what it is that we do in Bradford. So it was a wonderful experience, and as you know, we got the dole drummers out, and really it was a celebration. And I think for us, they had just previously visited Pakistan. So they were used to all the grandeur of celebration and
Do you
music.
think that's why they came to Bradford?
Well, I hope so. Either that, or they wanted to try out a really nice curry.
Yeah.
So and
It was an honour for my Lahore, is that
yes,
that
absolutely.
they chose.
And they showcased, you know, the wonderful sort of food. I think they made some milkshakes there as well, from what I read. They made some wonderful milkshakes and had the wonderful food. And as we know, My Lahore do some incredible charitable work within the city as well.
So I
I think
great respect for them, mashallah.
yeah, one of the reasons that they were contributing was not just to speak about the business side, but the charitable side and how they give back. Yeah. You have asked about the West Yorkshire Lieutenancy, and that side, I can't only speculate how it came about, but I did sort of receive some correspondence from the office post the royal visit to say, would you be interested in being a deputy lieutenant in West Yorkshire? So assisting the Lord Lieutenant, who in West Yorkshire is Ed Anderson, with his duties in representing the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen. So that was a huge honour, and as we know, the Lord Lieutenant assists with a number of duties in West Yorkshire, whether that's citizenship ceremonies, attendance at events, you know, the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service, a number of accolades that are given through communities and to communities, and recognising excellence. So yeah, it was very.
How was that experience of just getting the news? what did you like? Just tell me, how did you feel?
I think at the time,
Were you expecting?
I wasn't expecting to be asked to join the lieutenancy, and again, I did ask a little bit more about the role. What does it involve, and what would I have to do? And it was actually I was inducted during COVID, so it was quite difficult. But there was a lot of support there in terms of learning and knowing that you would then occupy, you know, quite an important position. And automatically, I guess you think that, you know, you do fall into that domain where once again you are a role model, you are a representative, especially to members from our own community. And you know, I remember having the discussion, you know, with the Lord Lieutenant and saying that, you know, would have to sort of honour that position, but also be a role model for younger people and communities in general. So yeah, great pride in doing that.
I believe it puts a huge responsibility, and of course a lot of respect and honour. An honour for
absolutely.
all of us. I always see you and I think, mashallah, may Allah protect you, may Allah keep you safe and give the ability to fulfill all the roles you are playing. And I would like to ask you, how do you feel about MBE?
So the MBE.
Explain us, a person like me or just the general audience, what do MBE means and how do you feel about this for yourself, and what is the benefit, or I would say, how does it affect you as a person after having that title?
So the
I put a few questions together.
So the MBE is a recognition from the Empire, and it is a recognition for an area of work that you may have specialised in or you've done particularly well in. It's a nomination that members of the public might put forward for you. So I wasn't aware that I had been put forward. To this day, I don't really know who's put me forward for that either. But the acknowledgement that I was given was for my work within Her Majesty's Prison Service, but also for my contributions to the community of Bradford. So by that, I think I've worked out, you know, the Muslim Women in Prison project, but also I think there was a lot of work that I done, especially during the COVID pandemic as well as prior and post. I've always kept those two passions running parallel to each other. I can't say that I've invested more in prisons and less in communities. They've always been both passionate areas of mine. So yeah, that was a surprise to receive that news in the New Year's honours list, and I think I had some correspondence come through the post in the morning, and I assumed that it was correspondence from the lieutenancy office. So I sort of.
So was it the same time?
No, it was about 2 years apart. So I sort of popped it on next to my coffee mug, and I thought, when I get home this evening I'll read this. And I was sort of rushing off to work, and then in the evening I came back and I opened it up expecting it to be correspondence from, as I've said, the lieutenancy office, and maybe some directions for something that was happening, and I'm very surprised to find actually it was the acknowledgement for the MBE. And I think that's we don't do this work, and I know I don't do this work for the acknowledgement. It's because, you know, it's something that's quite innate. It's a passion that really you can't transfer that to other people. It's something that's, you know, very organic, and it flourishes, and there's this sort of persistence and determination, and I think I'm just one of those people that has always had those qualities. So to be recognised for pioneering in certain areas, you know, it's hugely sort of humbling. But at the same time, I think, you know, I think more so for my family, it was quite pleasing for my family to know. Because we know community work is quite relentless. We know you're on the clock 24/7, and I don't joke when I say that. It is 24/7 on the clock. There's always something. There just are not enough hours in the day, and I think unfortunately, you know, many of us miss out on crucial moments with family, and sometimes we can be late to events.
It's the sacrifices you make for your role. And I think any awards, any recognition, it's just a bonus on your passion, whatever you do. Yes, your intentions are pure for the role you play, but recognitions like MBE, and I think you've got, I mean, I don't know all the awards, but you've got many awards, mashallah, mashallah, to your name. And that is definitely a bonus. That is definitely acknowledgement by the community and by different organizations that they value what you do. And as you say, pioneering something which is, it wasn't there before.
Yeah.
So you were the first one, the first Asian Muslim women who started something new to benefit our women. So definitely huge respect and honor and hard work.
Yeah. And I think it, as you've said, rightly so, Urfana, it's a win for the community.
Yeah.
Because it shows we can innovate, we can develop good practice, and actually we're very good at doing that. When we seek solutions, this is best practice that's been acknowledged. So for me personally, it wasn't just about me, it wasn't just about my family, it was about the entire community and how we project ourselves and our professional values and what are our ethics moving forward. So for me, and I say this to my colleagues as well, you know, I say it's a win for all of us whenever we go in, and thankfully they are balanced enough to also know that, and they absolutely cheer me on from the sidelines, just as I cheer them on in their specialist areas, to say, look, this is about us as a collective community.
Definitely. Community work is not one individual person. As you said, you are mentioning your colleagues, they are all there supporting you. And it's a collective group work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Teamwork, definitely. Moving on from there to, I know that you do a lot of charitable work, interfaith work.
Yeah.
Would you just shed some light there?
Yeah, and again, that's voluntary areas.
Yeah.
That's areas that I have always, you know, perhaps with the sort of multi-faith work, maybe seen a deficit in female involvement, and Muslim women being involved there. Quite traditionally, it has been men that are involved in multi-faith work, but you know, we know women are activists, mobilizers. We know how much we have to offer. So that's always been a passion of mine: connecting communities, connecting people through different faiths. And raising sort of the profile of what we as a community have to offer. So, you know, one example of that is, for example, as you know, on Christmas Day, it was our 10th year celebration for the Christmas dinner that the Khidmat Centre does for Christian elders on Christmas Day. So we had our 10-year anniversary this year. That is an example of grassroots-based multi-faith working.
Yeah, definitely.
So people that would otherwise be alone on Christmas Day, allowing others to celebrate their faith, giving space, and really showing our values as Muslims in doing so. And a lot of my other work can mean engaging with some of the other faith leaders in Bradford and bringing about change and affecting change in areas that collectively affect us all. So whether that's safeguarding of faith institutes, whether that is showing joint unity on issues that, you know, are international as well as national. So that's something I choose to do voluntarily. And my charitable work, again, you know, I've always been immersed in that. I think that plays a huge part in my own faith values. You know, it is sadaqah on my part as well. So wherever I can help, I will help. And really, that's the types of things that fill my cup and energize me. And you know.
Okay, I'm coming to the end. Just last few questions. Who is your inspiration in your life? I mean, it could be many people, but if you have to pick one.
I think if I'm looking close to home, I'd say my own mother.
Yeah.
Because I have seen how my mum has really adapted to the challenges of having a daughter like me, the challenges of, you know, accepting not just my ambitions but my decisions. You know, as a Pakistani migrant woman who perhaps you know, had certain gendered roles and lives in a community, in a society where there's a clear demarcation of women do this and men do this, and alhamdulillah, my own mum has worked out in the public sort of life as well, but accepted professions where you know, youth work isn't a profession that readily we understand.
They were not common
in
professions for a while.
No, prison work wasn't, you know, so she's very much adapted and respected me in terms of what I wanted to do, supported me in that. really at times where she might have been given a bit of a difficult, ride or comments from the community in terms of, oh, you have a daughter that would like to do this, or so she's really supported me into further education. She supported and helped me to pursue the career paths that I'd like to. And I know many parents that just don't do that. They just think, no, I can't. There's a saying in our community, what will people say? Log kya kahenge? And that really plagues our community. But if you're lucky and fortunate enough to have a parent that does, buy into what you'd like to do, but also adapt and learn along the way and say, look, I respect you as an adult. I respect what you've achieved. I'm very proud of you. And I would hope that, I would be like that with my own children, that I would actually be able to, maybe mold some thoughts and stereotypes that I have myself and just really move with the times. And I think strength and resilience is one of the greatest things I've learned from my mother, alhamdulillah. She's a very, very strong person, and she's given me that same fortitude. And I think that is what has kept me going in my professional life, but more so in the work that I do as well. And I think our women have a very silent but strong strength, and they have weathered so much, and they've passed that baton on to us as well to do that as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And after that comment, do you think how important that is for our women, for our daughters, for our daughter-in-laws, to have the respect, to have the acceptance from their family?
Of course it is.
In order to move on, in order to achieve. Yeah.
I think sometimes we unnecessarily maybe create barriers where they don't need to be. And these barriers, the shame is they're not faith-based barriers, they're not Islamic barriers, they're cultural barriers which are unnecessarily, we know that faith advocates for women to have an education, it advocates for women to pioneer, to move forwards, to give them the ability to go into working life and enterprise and fulfill their potential. We know that it is decreed that each individual is given a certain set of skills. They're given certain unique qualities and talents that we must go out into the world and really thrive and support those that need it the most. But unfortunately, culturally, sometimes that isn't there. And as women, I feel like we need to be advocates and open doors for other women. So it's so hugely important, and I try to do that both within my family life as well as my professional career, and give those women that are coming up after me the opportunity to not have to really learn the hard way.
It's true. Our culture is dominating the faith, and that causes a lot of problem. Okay, what motivates you?
What motivates me? I think I've got a really my mum says to me, you're stubborn, you've got a stubborn streak. So it might be that, I think there's so many things that do, and there's so many things that I've said that some qualities I have are quite innate. I have this really stubborn determination to make a difference and make a change. And I think because I've seen certain aspects of life that perhaps not everybody else has, that always gives you an impetus to do more, to be better, to be quite aware actually of the world around you, and in doing so you affect change. But also my faith is a huge motivator in what I do, and we honour those values of supporting others, supporting those that are vulnerable and invisible and really marginalised. I think that really does, and doing my community justice. I'm always for showcasing the best of my community, and if we're not doing something that's too great, how do we help to start to resolve some of that? So my faith has always been a huge propeller for me as well. So
when you said stubbornness, I was thinking about determination. You were thinking about...
My mum says, no, you're a stubborn mule at times, Sophia. You're a stubborn mule. And I said, yeah, but it gets me by, doesn't it? It serves me well. So, yeah, absolutely.
So, coming to the final question, how do you look after yourself? Think about all the roles you're playing.
Yes.
You're in all these different roles. How much importance do you give to your self-care? And what do you do? And any advice for our women?
Any advice for our
Yeah.
women? It's difficult. I think as women, we always put ourselves last, right? You're somebody's child, you're somebody's wife, you're somebody's parent. So unfortunately, over the ages, women find it difficult to put themselves first, don't they? They're everything to everybody, and the last person they think of is themselves. But there's times where you just do need to break away, especially when you're, like you said, wearing several hats in professions that are quite demanding and relenting. So for me, it's different things. It can be going for walks, it can be exercise, spending time with family, prayer. You just need to really find where your safe space is and where the space that enriches you is. So there are several things I do. I used to love travel as well, but the pandemic put a stop to that. So hopefully just going out to different countries and seeing other cultures and communities and the way that people live. I've always found that very, I've got a curious spirit, so I've always been quite enriched by that as well. Different ways of living and different ways that and means that people find to be happy. Because there's a certain lifestyle that we have in the UK that perhaps not people in other countries don't. They may not be as affluent as us, they may not be as connected as us or resourced as us, yet they find happiness. So they're the things that really nourish my spirit and my soul, and I perhaps don't do it as much as I should. So I should try to be better at it.
So Sophia, what is one thing you like about Bradford? Anything particular?
I think what sets Bradford apart is, and I know as Yorkshire people we're quite friendly, but Bradford people are really friendly actually. They're always willing to help, there's open hearts, there really is a warm welcome you get when you get here. That's I think that's a trait of Bradford that you really can't deny. So whether you're stopping to ask somebody for directions or whether you're wanting to be connected to somebody or access something, Bradford people really have, they really have this very human, down to earth sort of
so
resonance about them.
People.
You are helpful people. You're helpful people, warm people, inviting people. Alhamdulillah, there is a lot of good to be said about the people of Bradford and people of pride. You take great pride in the city, as much as there's an awareness that some parts of Bradford are doing really well, others we need to work on. Proud Bradfordians is what you all are, and we see that and we celebrate that as well.
Okay, thank you. And if you get an opportunity to change one thing in Bradford, what would you like to do?
I think as somebody that works with different audiences and different client base, where it's very young people, female only environments or older people, one of the things that I think we don't do enough in Bradford is sharing stories and sharing journeys. And I've seen this over my community development career where I would personally, and I have explored this in other parts of West Yorkshire, I'd personally like to know more about the stories of migrants, and I think young people could really learn from them. I would really like to know more about the stories of women that have had certain journeys and hardships. And
so you're talking about real life stories?
Real life stories, inspiring stories, and because I work largely with a young clientele at times as well, sometimes when you're teaching them the ropes, or sometimes when you're referencing certain stories, you think, why can't these stories be more accessible in the public domain, where I wouldn't have to sit here on a one-to-one with each individual, but those stories become live, and instead of us recreating the wheel, and instead of young people learning the hard way, where are those role models? Because some people have actually done really well in Bradford, but as you're aware, your work then sometimes takes you into a different domain, and sometimes people can detach or move away from the community. So who are those people that really grafted, really pioneered, and did very well for themselves, and where are their stories of hope, their stories of inspiration, where are the stories of really what it took, what did it take to do that, to say, well, I've come from BD7 or BD5 or whichever postcode's in Bradford, and this has been my succession and my journey. You know, so I really think we need to do that more. I think we could be doing that better, and it would really seek to not just inspire younger generations, but also be a little vault in history where stories are captured and stories are kept for future generations to say, this is a trajectory, this is where we came from, especially for migrant communities. You know, we are a city of sanctuary. There are so many migrants that come to Bradford and have been coming to Bradford for many, many decades. So how are we documenting and charting that, as I've said, as a bookmark in history, but also to invigorate the rest of us as well?
Okay, Sofia, I want to say thank you to you for giving us so much time from your busy schedule. So thank you very much today.
Thank you. It's been an honour. It's been a real honour, and especially because it was yourself that's done this interview. It's like speaking with an older sister. So thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you. Please share, like, subscribe to our channel for more exciting videos to come. Thank you.
You've been watching B4B TV. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And join us next time for another episode.